Okay, I think we can get started. So, first of all, welcome to today's webinar. My name is David. I'm your facilitator. Before I hand you over to Aaron and Nathan and Francis, I just want to give you a quick welcome and walk you through the plans for today. So today we are covering continuous learning, strategies for upskilling your contact center agents, as you can see in the screen. Just a bit about the folks who have registered for the webinar, and again, apologies for having to move it out a week, just to facilitate our panel. Just a bit of a breakdown of who has registered. So it's always good to see this. So we've a usual mix of folks. So about 60% from the US and the UK, which is our typical mix. And then, yeah, we've about 10% Ireland, 6% South Africa, and the remainder 30-odd% from various locations. So this is the typical breakdown that we have, and it kind of has a good representation of our customer base too. And then a similar breakdown by industry. So again, our typical industries that we see a lot on these webinars: financial services, just about 24%. Technology, almost 20%, retail, 8%, 11% or so, and so on. So yeah, nice mix of industries there. So welcome to you all today. So that's just it for me now. We just have one more slide, and I'm going to hand you over to Aaron, who will take you through the conversation today. So Aaron, I'll hand it over to you now, and I'll just bring up the speakers on the slide.
Thank you very much, David. Appreciate it. You're all very welcome. As David alluded to, my name is Aaron. I'm going to be your host for today. And we're going to be discussing key strategies for driving success in contact centers through continuous learning and development. I think we'll all agree we're in an industry where customer expectations are consistently evolving. So it's imperative that we're equipping agents with the right skills and knowledge to be able to handle the ever-evolving customer expectations. So over the course of today's session, we're going to explore how businesses can assess skill gaps, design interactive and effective training programs, leverage technology, and measure the impact of learning. So we'll also discuss how to create a culture that encourages ongoing growth and improvement. So very excited to get started on the topics. We've 4 topics to go through today, but before we do that, I wanted to introduce our panel. So firstly, we have Francis. Want to maybe introduce yourself, Francis?
Yes, happy to. Hi, I'm Francis Clevin. I'm the Senior Director of Core Customer Experience at LearnUpon, and have my entire professional background in learning. First started as a faculty member at university, and then moved into the administrative side of digital learning at universities, and then a while ago moved to the dark side of SaaS, but have been working with SaaS companies, learning SaaS companies, first at Coursera and now at LearnUpon, and working with companies on their employee training strategy as well as their customer training strategy. And I'm also a manager too, so I'm excited for this conversation because I think about it sort of from the theoretical perspective of what you should be doing with your learning programs, and then also think a lot about it of a leader of a team and the reality of it, and where I'm maybe fall short of what a manager should be doing in that. So excited for this conversation.
Thank you very much, Francis. Appreciate it. And our second member today, Nathan. Nathan, would you introduce yourself, please?
Absolutely. Good afternoon. So my name is Nathan Dring. I run my own small consultancy business. So we have called Nathan Dring and Associates because we use associates, and I'm just not that creative in terms of naming. But part of my work with there is helping organisations, sector agnostic really, with the people side of performance. And so a lot of the work I've done has landed in the contact centre space. Prior to this, I was thick end of a decade at Asda, looking after their contact centre estate for learning, development, and engagement, and that kind of a global footprint. A lot of it outsourced as well. So a lot of the requirement for people not only to learn but act in a way that was aligned to the culture and the brand of Asda, even though they weren't Asda per se. Yeah, and then the other hat I wear, as it says on the screen, is that I am part of the customer contact panel team. So whilst they do outsourcing and tech, the third leg of their stool is the people development side, recognizing that sometimes the issue isn't tech or isn't where people are placed, but it's just getting people to do the things they know they should do more often, so we can get better performance as a result. And that's where I sit. I work for myself, so I'm not in the position of Francis in terms of learning as a manager, although my wife regularly jokes with me and asks, have I managed to get colleague of the month, even though I work on my own most of the time.
I'm sure the Christmas parties are great, Nathan. No?
Rock and roll.
Look, thank you both. Really excited to get started. So for topic one, we're going to discuss the importance of continuous learning in contact centers. So continuous learning is key to maintaining high agent performance, delivering excellent customer service, but it also helps agents to stay confident in what they're doing, become adaptable, and as we discussed in the introduction, being prepared for the evolving customer expectations. I think we find that businesses that invest in ongoing development see stronger customer relationships. They're also seeing improved service quality, long-term success, and many more pluses to having a strategy in place. But how can organizations create a culture that truly values continuous learning? So a question for the panel is, what are the biggest challenges that you feel businesses face in making continuous learning a priority for a business? And I'll start with Francis on that one, if you don't mind.
Yeah. So I'll start with two abstracts and then two concrete. So time and value. So where do you find the time to do this? This is not just the time for learning, and I'll get to that in a second, but where do you find the time for strategy? These are huge, huge things to think about of how you're going to develop continuous learning, and where are you going to find that time? But the value piece of it, and that'll get to my second point around managers, but the value piece of it of, is there agreement in the company and full understanding across the company and certainly amongst leadership about the value of continuous learning? And I think we've talked about continuous learning a lot in this field, but really ensuring that people understand what it means and are really bought into the value of it, because I think there tends to be a lot of, no one's going to say they don't value continuous learning. And so, but I think if you really dig into it, do people, and especially, and this is my second point around managers, of you have to get manager buy-in. You have to. That is the point of failure and the point of success of all of your learning programs. And again, I speak to that as an evangelist of continuous learning and also as a manager who is oftentimes the impediment to continuous learning. And you have to get that manager buy-in and really dig in with your managers in ways that allow them to share concerns and doubts and skepticism, and so that you're not just asking questions of, do you value learning? Who's going to say no? But asking questions around, what are the things that you would need to see continuous improvement in your team? What are the challenges that you have? And really practicing some empathy and good discovery with your managers, because assuming that they're bought in or assuming that they know what you're talking about when it comes to continuous learning, I think a lot of it, managers especially do not like to admit when they don't know things or they don't understand something. And so really starting with your managers. I see so many learning and development teams go at it alone without managers, partly because managers are hard to get in touch with. They're hard to get to do things. So thinking that it'll just be faster to just go without managers, you have to get their buy-in. And so find your evangelist there. And then I think systems, right? Systems of what are your systems and data that allow you to deliver this continuous learning. And so that would be the other point of breakdown. But again, if your only takeaway here is managers, talk to your managers regularly, and hold yourself accountable for that feedback loop, because again, speaking as a manager, we're not the easiest people to deal with. We're not the easiest people to have frank conversations with, but you won't get anything done with IC continuous learning unless you have the manager buy-in.
Thank you, Francis. Nathan, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, no, great points, all of which I agree with. I think one of the bear traps, and it's something I fell into when I was at Asda. Number one is continuous learning being conflated with continuous training. And so we think if there's anything learning opportunity, it needs to be somehow training. And so then to the point that Francis made around getting into the managers is we now need to, in essence, encourage them to say yes to what could cannibalize operational performance. We've got to then work with, the workforce planning and scheduling resourcing teams to kind of pull people away from the day job. And in essence, you're saying, here's something that's going to create you a headache and might hit where you are most likely to be measured. Would you like to do it? And all the best will in the world, they say no to that. So I think one of the challenges is organizations have sometimes lost a bit, and in the L&D function have lost a bit of creativity around how we might do learning, because they see continuous training as the answer to continuous learning. And I think where we get cut through, and where I've seen it with clients, is where we find ways that you can do much more learning on the job, and you use the rhythms and routines that exist, and you do learning within that, and then you find things on the day job to do learning. So I think that's a big part of it, is just a lack of creativity, and therefore the presentation of an offer is automatically unappealing, because if you think most managers are on the hook for delivering the day-to-day metrics, and then you present them with, I would like to throw a hand grenade into your day-to-day metrics, does that sound like a good idea? Well, surprise, surprise, they say no to that. So I think that's one of the challenges. I think, but kind of to reiterate the huge importance of it, I think it was the book that lots of people might know, Drive, by Dan Pink. And it talks about kind of intrinsic motivators, the things that get us out of bed, and the things that enable us as human beings to care and want to get involved and be at our best. And one of the three tenets of that is this sense of mastery. So you've got the tension that people want to get better, want to know they're developing, want to feel growth versus last week, versus last month, versus last year. But we sometimes don't meet that need because our offer is a bit unimaginative, a bit uncreative. And the things I've said before about, well, let's trot you off to a classroom and, ruin the day job for you, as you might perceive it if you're a manager.
I like that idea about learning versus training, because one thing I see, or mistake I often see, and we make this too internally, of sort of onboarding versus ongoing training, and not understanding the persona of your manager and your learner in those two areas of the journey, where in onboarding, I couldn't be a bigger fan of our, like, the resources that our L&D team provides to new hires in onboarding is a huge lift for me, and it's incredibly beneficial, and I see it and I feel it. But then helping managers understand then where there's benefits after onboarding. But I think also for learners, I think we make the mistake of thinking of our learners, of our employees, as being the same persona learner during onboarding, when they have all the time in the world, versus on the job learning. And I think we understand that in theory, but really challenging yourself to think about the specifics of the people who are taking this training. What does their day-to-day look like? What time? So if you're building an hour-long course, like, being really honest with yourself, does anyone actually have the time for that? Where would they find the time for an hour-long course? And what would it mean if they had to go to 3 different logins to get it? So that's been really helpful for me. And then also with some of our other customers, and there's great persona research around there that will give you some questions, like, really, and it will feel basic, but really sketch out the personas of who you're delivering learning to, so you understand, do they sit in a desk? Do they sit in an office? One thing that came out that I broke my heart around persona work that we did with a customer, of their learners were saying they didn't have a quiet place to do their training during the day. Some learners, they were able to do that in a busy room, but some learners said, I absolutely can't concentrate to do learning, and I have no place to do it. And like, really thinking about those practicalities of it as well. So if you're doing all the theory piece of it, like, really think about the physical practicalities of it.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you both. I think just to echo what both of you have touched on, we've all been guilty of it. When somebody comes to you with something else to add to your diary, we look at it as a time burden. So it's about making it as seamless and engaging as possible. So thank you both for your inputs on that. We'll move on now to topic 2, which is assessing skill gaps and designing effective learning programs. So understanding skill gaps is crucial to improving performance and service quality. And I think by identifying the areas for development, businesses can provide targeted training that helps agents excel in their roles. So like a well-designed learning program should be engaging, adaptable, and focused on real business needs. But how can organizations ensure training is both effective and practical for agents? So for my next question, and I'm going to start with you on this one, Nathan, what are the best methods for identifying skill gaps in a fast-paced contact center environment?
So I want to be slightly contentious here, and so please shoot me down, challenge me on this one. I actually think a lot of performance gaps aren't a result of a lack of skill; it's a lack of will. So if I manage a team and someone in my team is late to work every single day, I don't need to take them into a classroom or do an e-learning with them on how to tell the time, and I probably don't need to buy them a watch. They know all of that stuff. It's just that in the moment they decide something else is more important, and it's an emotional behavioural thing that kicks in. So I actually think that one of the things, if you look at how people are behaving and where the gaps are, then you'll start to see what behavioural issues need to be tackled. And the good thing about that is you've got indicators left, right, and centre, from either quality or CSAT, ESAT, NPS, whatever it might be. So that there's a range of great indicators that will show whether people are performing and using the skill that they should have. But whether or not they use that, I think, is more often driven by behaviours. So I appreciate that doesn't quite answer the question, but I actually think a big part of it is if we look at what people are and aren't doing, so start with the metrics. So the metrics where they need to be. No, right, we'll dial it back. Why is that? Well, that might be because they're not using the skills we want them to use. Right, okay. And I think sometimes training stops there and goes, okay, well, we need to do that then. Let's do something on that thing. And I actually think we need to pause and go a little bit deeper and go, yeah, but why is it? They know they should care for a customer. They know they should show trust. They know they should collaborate with other teams within the organisation. You can take them into a classroom and they'd all nod along to that and all say, hell yes. And yet when it comes to it, they don't do it. So we need to go a layer deeper and go, okay, so why is that? And start to get into some of the stuff around human behaviour and human emotion that drives the skill, that drives the output. I think that where people perhaps pull up too quickly, too short, as they go, right, we're not hitting the numbers. So you kind of, if you like, yeah, in some organisations, and certainly ones I've worked for, that's where the conversation sort of stops. Then so you just tap the dial. It'd be like driving down the motorway and getting frustrated with the speedometer, and you just tap it without thinking about what your feet are doing. Okay, fine. Your next layer goes down and says, okay, well, we know we need to be doing that, and so we know, and it's just the skill logical level. But when we consider actually we're dealing with people, or on any given day they might have a slightly different persona, to go back to what Francis said. So what is it that's underlying that's driving them, and how do we get them to tap into those and realise the behaviours they need to bring to work each day and are invited to bring to work each day, from which they bring to bear the skills we need so that we can get the outcomes and outputs that we require. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of where my head's at with this one.
No, it does, and I agree with you. Will is a massive part of it, and not only that, I think traditional training methods can be quite generic. Like there needs to be an element of customization to the person that you're looking to train and develop, because a one-size-fits-all approach just won't work. Francis, anything you want to add to that?
Just all of that absolutely resonates with me. One of the points I wanted to make is before you do anything with skills, make sure you have a shared understanding and vocabulary across your organization about what you mean by skills. So exactly to Nathan's point of, are you sure? And again, this is talking to managers. Are you sure that managers are on the same page with you versus skill versus behavior or attitude or emotion? Because if you get that right, skill development can be very impactful and can be delivered quickly with a really profound impact. But I think about something that, where customers that I've worked with, when you identify a skill, so negotiation, so you say, we are looking to do some targeted training for negotiation for our sales team or our customer success team, you can really you can identify some skills there that you can deliver quickly with immediate impact. But if there's emotion piece of it or the attitude piece of it where I'm not comfortable doing this or I don't know that this is part of my job, I think those are things that you are going to be disappointed if you go down the skills road but you're not solving for the right problem. And I think things like you'll see on any skill set collaboration and this one, right? But you're not looking to build collaboration skills usually. You're looking to change attitudes and behavior around collaboration and understanding is the reason that our support team didn't reach out to our customer success team on this. Is it just people are too busy and there wasn't 30 minutes to do that? And that's the problem you're looking to solve, not how do I build collaboration skills. But once you've done that, then skills can be really, really powerful and impactful, and people can be really profoundly inspired and changed by skills that they can develop. But just make sure you have the vocabulary right before you get started.
Yeah, I think that's a really key point as well to go back to a bit around getting managers on board, because I think again they're probably, and I'd not all, but I think quite a lot are wired to training for skills, so they understand that and they see the value of that. And then you go, okay, no, well, we're going to do something around behaviours, and I don't know when it crept in, but all of that now kind of that sits in the pink and fluffy, or that's HR, and it's like that's the soft stuff that doesn't matter. and and it's trying to help people know, no, that's the hard stuff.
Yes.
Yes, it's soft, but it's hard.
Yes.
It's soft stuff that's hard to do that drives the hard metrics that you measure. And so again, it's that joint understanding, as you say, Francis, of helping managers to understand that this is what will get you there.
Yes.
So you know, this is the equivalent of stopping for fuel on the motorway when you're in a hurry to get somewhere. If you don't stop and do it, you get nowhere at all. And I appreciate that you might not want it, but if you don't do this, you will never get there. And it's that education piece all the time around the value of this stuff. And yeah, I don't know who it was that first used the term pink and fluffy, but I wish they would have not, because I think that has been a hindrance ever since.
But I think almost the pink and fluffy, though, is also the scary stuff and the hard stuff. So, managers, and this is part of your empathy building and your understanding of managers. And I remember working with university professors on this when we were asking them to move outside of the traditional lecture format and do things that were more project based and group based and discussion based. And you could tell the ones that were absolutely terrified because they did not, if you took the lecture piece away, they didn't know what their value was. And so also, I mean, this is a skills development for managers. Like this is rolling up the chain of, are you sure that managers, if you take away the skill piece for managers, which you should, that's the thing your L&D team should deliver, do they understand what they're left with? And do they feel like they're able to deliver that now if you're left with the pink and fluffy?
Yeah, because it's a much scarier place, isn't it? Because
Yes.
if I miss my metric, Francis comes to me and says, Nathan, we needed you to hit 10. You only hit 8. It's very logical, so we can have a conversation. If you come to me and go, actually, Nathan, I'm not seeing you being as collaborative as I'd have wanted. Well, now we're into kind of a murky fog, and that could go anywhere, and I don't
Yes.
quite know how to enter it or exit it in the right way.
Yep.
Brilliant. Well, look, thank you both. And just before we move on to the next topic, do either of you have any observations in terms of incorporating strength-based coaching into ongoing learning and development? I'm conscious we've been focused on the skill gaps and upskilling, etc. But any thoughts on including strengths-based coaching?
I don't mind jumping in. I've got one of my associates who does that, and it's huge because again, it's tapping into the way the human brain's wired. So if I have a bucket full of energy, I can invest into either trying to correct a ongoing weakness, if you like, or trying to dial up a strength. I get far more bang for buck putting all my colours on red and going like, well, I'll invest in the strength, because I mean I know, and I'm sure everyone on the line knows intuitively there are things you're just not that good at that you have to work hard every day just to keep your head above water. But there are things where you're absolutely flying, and if you can get into that zone, it's great. And I can remember when I had the quality team as well as the L&D team, I had the quality team under me at Asda, and this was the trap I fell into. And every conversation was about where we've gone wrong. And so the culture was, we joked about it. We called it the projectionist culture. So if you go to the cinema and the projectionist does their job seamlessly, no one cares, no one notices, no one says a word about the projections. You just look at all the great outputs on the screen and go, isn't that brilliant? But the one day they do anything other than perfection, everyone's grumbling, everyone's staring at them, everyone's chuntering, and their name's mud. And the risk is you get that sort of environment. Like, as long as I don't mess up, no one will say a word. But my one bad day, or the one time I happen to get a call pulled out of the pot that isn't so good, I'll get lambasted for it. And so, actually, just from a cultural point of view, it's really damaging, because everyone just has this sort of tall poppy syndrome. Don't get caught either way. Just stay mediocre, because there's a concern that I'm only going to be spoken to if it's a bad thing. And then feedback becomes an unhelpful loop, because it's seen as a kicking rather than a supportive thing, and you just end up just downward spiraling, really, I think.
And I think even from a data perspective, right, and even the term skill gaps assumes that that's what we're looking to solve, is the gaps, the skill gaps that we have, but we're not very effective at cataloging skill resources. And that's really important, and not, I mean, there's the pink and fluffy part of it about making sure people understand their strengths, but there's also real business value to that. Like, that's your inventory of skills, and that's really important information as you're thinking about being nimble and adaptable as a business, that you can immediately have a catalog of strengths and skills, that when you need to think about directions or changes in the business, that you have that. And most organizations and companies would not have that, and they're just going on mostly assumptions about what teams are good at and what they're not.
Yeah.
Thank you. And look, these are people you can leverage to upskill other agents as well. So there's a lot of value to it. But look, thank you both. Moving on to the next topic, with topic 3, which is leveraging technology for learning and development. And I feel like this is one we could spend a lot of time on, but technology, as we know, is transforming contact centers. It's transforming how they train and support their teams with things like AI-driven coaching, e-learning programs, and automation. They're enabling it to make it more personalized, efficient, and scalable. But by integrating digital tools, businesses can enhance agent performance and create continuous learning opportunities. How do we ensure technology is used effectively rather than just for the sake of innovation, because everybody else is doing it? So the question I have, and to start with you on this one, Francis, is what are the key factors in choosing the right technology for learning and development?
Yep. So I'm not sure which of these I would put first, but there's two things that anytime I'm talking to customers or colleagues, especially around AI and AI tools, you need to understand your business's perspective on it. And you might not know immediately. It's going to be reaching out and having some conversations, but as a whole, is your company driving in this direction? And are they investing in AI? Are they essentially gung-ho on AI? Or is there a more cautious approach? Is there some skepticism? Is there some caution? And then all the things around security considerations, and who you would need to get approval for those tools, because it's really, really important. So because it's going to help shape the conversations that you have about the technology that you might want to bring into your organization. So understand who, especially around your decision makers, around the business's perspective around AI. And then I think, and this, like, take some time for yourself. Like, what is your perspective? And you don't have to share this with anyone. I think just really honestly think about it. And similar to what I said about, right, in theory, I think continuous learning and professional development is super important. And I'm the biggest evangelist of learning, but like my actual behavior as a manager does not reflect that. And similar with AI, like, is it something in theory you're behind, but like, do you utilize it? Are you familiar with the risks and the opportunities? I'll share an example of we use a customer experience platform, and they have a AI chatbot as part of their support team. And months and months, I didn't use it because I had a perspective on what an AI chatbot would be, and it would be sending me knowledge base articles. And a colleague said, actually, it's amazing, and it will get you answers immediately, and will also get you to their support team if you need them. And I started using it, and I had to admit to myself, I had no idea that this is what it could do and what benefit it would bring. So, on a personal level, like really investigate your own knowledge and experience around these tools so that you don't need to be an expert, but you do need to have a perspective and some experience around it, and certainly talk to other people. It's not on you to educate yourself on all of that. And then really think about the spectrum of what AI can do. And as you're talking to, and you're thinking about different products, and most products now are offering some AI functionality. But kind of to the conversation around managers wanting to focus on skills and not on the hard things, of I see something similar with AI of we want AI to maybe do the hard things that we've been putting off or we don't want to do. And we sometimes forget about AI can just do a lot of the menial things, or maybe the things that but we're more comfortable doing. So building a spectrum of what AI can do for you. And then thinking about, yeah, your goals for the business's goals for the next couple of years, and where technology is going to play into that, and especially how it plays. This has changed in the way that we've sold our own product, Learn Upon, of how does this technology fit into the full ecosystem and tech stack of your company? And if you don't know that, you need to find out. And you need to talk to all of those owners of that technology, because that, A, it's important for the sign off on budget, but especially in learning, if it's not integrating with other systems, or you don't know how to get it integrated with other systems, that's always the kiss of death of any L&D program. We have that for our own sake, for a health score of a customer. If they're delivering employee training and there's no automated HR integration with their system, that's immediately a red health score, because that program will not succeed. So the integration piece of it, of both evaluating tech, but also how are you ensuring that that tech is well integrated across your company?
Perfect. Nathan, anything you want to add to that?
Well, I'm very much an analog in a digital world, in terms of some of my approaches. But I think the huge value is, particularly if you're thinking, the bit where the menial tasks, the day-to-day, the more simplistic stuff might be taken from agents. So they're going to be left with more complexity. So to have to remember everything in that moment, whilst potentially under pressure, because if you've taken away just the, where is my order, can I process a payment, sort of those sorts of things, and therefore every conversation is that bit more emotionally charged, slightly more pressured, slightly more complex, we're going to move agents into a slightly more of a stress zone, right? And as we do that, because we know that when you're stressed, your IQ decreases, it's not your fault, you just become a dimmer version of yourself. So actually, to expect them in that to remember everything and all the complexity, so just to be able to, at the press of a button, go, oh, what is that thing? I mean, I can't remember some days what I had for breakfast in the morning, let alone all these myriad things that, and if I get it wrong, guess what? That's the time you're the person who's dragged some sort of walk of shame, sat in a glass box and given a bad score. So there's a lot of pressure to it. So why not just make things available at the drop of a hat? So I think in the moment, it's a brilliant guide and nudge and quick go-to. I think that is superb. The thing I've seen it used terribly for, and where I would always caution against, is people who haven't nuanced their approach to learning, development, and training into this new technology. So, classic example was an organization I worked for got an LMS platform, like we can do e-learning. So, what did? They just uploaded all the slides from training into e-learning. I can see Francis' toes are virtually curling under the table as I say this. And then it's okay. Here's a 20 minutes of e-reading of just slides that have no kind of real relevance to you. And then at the end, there's like 10 questions, but the questions are so base. Well, of course you're going to answer that correctly. So actually, you do this, and that's when it's a complete waste of time. And they come off the phones to do this thing, or come away from the day job to do this thing, and then understandably managers are irritated. Think, well, what was the point of that? So I think there has to be a learning and a willingness to learn from within L&D functions to go, okay, this stuff isn't, again, I think the reluctance being AI is going to take away my job, so therefore I'll keep it at bay, thanks very much, and actually go, no, like with everyone else, it can enhance and augment what you're doing, don't fear it, but you do have to get used to it. You do have to understand it, and you have to say, well, how can it help? Don't be precious about it. Don't have a barrier to it, because it's not after your job. So I think there's a key part of that. I think then a big part I would say is it has to then, a big part of how it's then rooted into the day job, rooted into people's actual understanding of how it matters to them. I think they'll almost go the other way, and then we augment that in the conversations that we're having. Okay, so if everyone's done this thing, then we get together, and in our next team huddle, rather than just talk about yesterday's numbers, we're going to talk about what we've learned and how might that matter and what might we do differently. So actually, we have this virtuous cycle where one nudges the other, hence continuous learning, right?
And
Absolutely.
and being honest about who your competitors are, right? I think we don't think about this in L&D enough. Of your competitors are TikTok, your competitors are ChatGPT, your competitors are YouTube, and we all know that. We all know that if you need a quick reminder about how to do a pivot table in Excel, you're not going to your LMS, you are going to the quickest possible, shortest possible avenue. So really understanding that you are in a competitive space for people's time and for how they learn things, and that there is content out there that is likely more accessible and sometimes better than the content that you have. Yeah, Nathan, I was like toes curling under the table, and certainly I think we started this in COVID, and it was necessary at the time, but it's just not acceptable now of uploading recorded webinars as a course. Um, right? It's not a training course. It's a webinar. It's a recorded meeting. That's not training. That's not a course. But there's so many incredible tools to turn that into something meaningful.
Yeah.
Even just an AI summary of it. We've started to do that with, if we do a session, a product training session with our product team, for our support team and our CX team, of instead of expecting, and nobody's watching the recorded video if they missed it. It's 90 minutes long. That's not going to happen, and it's a really bad experience. It's a great experience when you're there in person. It's a bad experience if you're watching it after the fact. But just provide the AI summary. Like that, really, it can be read in 2 minutes. At minimum, and there's great tools to help you even just pull out snippets of content to create other videos that sort of summarize that. So I think that's the risk is, right, running sort of blind into this is all going to save us, and this will improve everything, and then the not being realistic about in both the competitive nature of it, and then also, to Nathan's point, if you're worried about AI taking away sort of content creation tasks, are we sure that our original content is good? Because a lot of it just isn't. And being honest about that, where a recorded webinar is not good content. And so I think there's yeah, just some honest conversations to have across your business and with yourself, and understanding your learners, so that we can be better adaptable, and be my hope for L&D is that we can be leaders in this and not be I had somebody last year say, they were an instructional design team, and they said our goal for next year is to get out of the basement, and we hate it. We love being in the basement. We would love being in our dark corner creating courses, but we have to get out of the basement this year. And I thought that was so profound and so wise, and I've even thought about it of myself, of yes, L&D has to get out of the basement, because the conversations are happening upstairs, and we need to be there, and we have an opportunity to be at the big table and to be thought leaders at the big table, so we have to be bold enough and courageous enough to do that.
Yeah, I completely echo that. I'm currently coaching a head of L&D at the moment, and she has that kind of inferred timidity about where she belongs. And the phrase I use, and this kind of maybe echoes back to my past. So I remember family gatherings. You have like the big grown-ups table, and then it always the way it be. I don't know if this is just where I grew up. You then hook out some rickety table, like an old picnic table, or like a wallpapering table, and that would be put over there. And that was like the kids colouring in table. So this is where the proper conversation took place. You go over there and do some colouring in. And I said to her, I said, like, for too long, you sit at the colouring in table. So the grown-ups table is ops and finance, and they make all the decisions. And when they've made the decisions, they give you the sheet to colour it in so it's palatable for everybody else. I said, you need to stick your elbows out and be at that table. And there's a real reluctance because almost the label of, well, you're down there has just been, okay, well, I'll just accept that then. This is my lot. And trying to get people to, for want of a better phrase, be a bit more bullshit and go, no, you actually need me up there, because if this is going to land, I need to be involved right at the head of this thing, is absolutely critical.
Yeah. I think, look, to add to that, you're not only selling these things upwards. So when you're trying to bring in a new tool, you obviously have to sell the ROI to management that you get the budget, but you can't forget to sell it downwards as well. So we see that a lot of the time when we're onboarding score-buddy clients. It's just make sure that you're keeping everybody in the loop on the why and the benefits at each level, so that any implementation that you're rolling out is going to be successful, and give yourself every chance. So thank you both for your thoughts on that one. And we're at our final topic, which is measuring the impact of learning and fostering continuous improvement. So measuring training effectiveness is crucial for ensuring learning initiatives are successful. Key metrics like agent performance, CSAT, and retention can help assess impact. Fostering a culture of continuous learning or continuous improvement means supporting agents' ongoing development. But how can businesses ensure training leads to long-term growth? So for our final question of the day from myself anyway, what are the best ways to measure the long-term impact of training on agent performance and business success? Nathan, we'll start with you.
Okay, so I think the two caveats of this that people have to hold to is, number one, they see it's long term, and number two, they measure it so they know where they are now and where they want to get to. And again, I think this is a thing that historically L&D functions of, because we just wade in and we join in because we're maybe quite people pleasers, we've got an altruistic and creative side, so we'll just wade in, right? So I think, like, where are we now and what's our kind of postcard from the future of where we want to be, but also recognize it's long term, because in order to get there, we're going to be shifting human behaviors. So I think that has to be part of the conversation. I think another part of this is to also understand, therefore, if we're shifting human behaviors, we're talking correlation, not causation.
Yes.
And so we can't always go, we did this and therefore we're not flipping a switch. People are far more complex than that. And to the personas point earlier, I might present really well one day, less so the next day because I stood on a piece of Lego, missed the bus, or whatever it might be. So we are far more nuanced and complex than just that. So we have to understand it's long term. We need to know where we're aiming for, and we need to recognise it's the correlation aspect of that. The third part of it, and this was some wisdom that was given to me a while ago, which is sort of stuck, and I think it's stuck because either I like to believe it because I want it to be true, or I think it is true and therefore it's brilliant. Is that so behavioural stuff is intangible. So, and the guy said you can't measure the intangible, but you evidence it through story. And I really liked that. And I had the privilege of kind of giving a keynote the other week, and I put up a little slide that showed a picture of my kids and said, my kids love me. And I'll tell you how I know. And then I put next to it a chart of their kind of love performance out of 100 and people said, obviously that's ridiculous because you don't measure it. So if I wanted to explain that my kids love me, I'd tell you a story. So I'd evidence it rather than measure it. And again, it sounds like pedantry, but I think if people could understand these subtle differences, so it's evidence not measured, it's correlation, it's not causation. I think if we can get people into understanding that, because what we're really seeking to do is shift the way people think so that they behave differently. And that is not done at the flick of a switch. That's not done just by tapping into the logical stuff. And so therefore it takes a longer term commitment with a clear goal, and you do start to see things move. And I think the challenge that L&D have always had is, rather than look at a return on invested time, they've just looked at return on investment. So they're now trying to stick dollars and pounds to a behavioural shift, which is very difficult to do if we're really honest. So you either try some kind of smoke and mirrors trick of this, or you just give up on it. And actually saying, well, because we invested this time, we have these things, and because we knew where we were going over long term, we can see we're getting there. But without a start point and a future goal and the recognition of a longer term approach, which are two of the key parts in your question, I don't think L&D will really know how to have the conversation. And then the final bit is as well, I think that the basement mentality means as well, I think sometimes L&D has learned really well to speak to itself. learned really well maybe to speak to the people in the classroom or the people who are learning. They've learned to speak well to HR functions. They haven't necessarily learned the language of that top table. So even when they have added value, they don't know how to put it into a language that is recognized by those people who are seeking it. So they might have said all the right things, they've not used any of the right words, and so the value isn't recognized.
Yeah, the top table piece, and so even in the notes I wrote myself before this, you do have to start at the top table when you're thinking about measuring impact, because you need to understand the impact that matters to the business. And I think you're going to need to understand some nuance there, but understanding what matters at the top table is actually not that difficult. What matters is decreasing cost, increasing revenue, and decreasing risk. Like there's nothing else that matters at the top table. Um, the nuance piece of it is the priorities are going to shift within that, and you need to make sure that you understand when priorities shift. I was talking with somebody 6 months ago, and she was talking about her course enrollment numbers, and she wanted to drive them. And I said, what are we driving towards? And she's like, improving employee satisfaction. That's the thing that's important to the business. And I said, are you sure? When did you clarify that? Because what I see in the industry is that retention and performance is what matters, and that's shifted. And she said, I actually haven't checked in on that in 2 years. And she did have some conversations and said, employee satisfaction isn't what's on people's minds. And so I think there's the understanding that there's very few things that the top table cares about. Like you don't need to be an expert on it. It's just increase revenue, decrease cost, decrease risk. But being dialed in, you have to be dialed in of what matters to the business at that moment. I always ask people and try to ask myself of what matters most to the business at this moment. And, is it retention? Um, is it efficiency? Is it revenue? Like what matters most? Um, and then the causation correlation thing, it's so important that you you have to be comfortable with the causation piece, because it's so terrifying to say, I'm signing up to be responsible for decreasing cost or increasing revenue. That seems terrifying. How can I possibly deliver that? But you're not expected to. You're expected to have a correlation to it. And I love the storytelling piece of it, partly because I am an English literature major. And so everyone said, what are you going to do with that degree? I'm a great storyteller. And so and L&D people are great storytellers. So when we talk about skills, that's a strength and a skill. And so use that, and then develop the other areas around the business vocabulary, the business acumen, and your stakeholder management. But the storytelling piece, absolutely, because you you're not going to be able to deliver causation, or the causation that you show is not going to be meaningful to your executives. It just isn't. Course enrollments or time spent in training, that just isn't going to cut it.
I think as well. So I was just going to say, having some key stats to hand can be really helpful. So, UK 2025, I think the current rate of attrition in contact centres is like 32% in the UK. And if you think for every new hire, they reckon it's about $4,000. So it doesn't actually take much to go, back to the point around the reason people come to work and the reason they feel engaged and connected with their work and motivated, and they're like just to actually stay and do the job. If we can get fewer people leaving, then we've already contributed. It's very hard to demonstrate the value. Like if a tightrope walker gets from one side to the other, it's very hard to demonstrate the value of the safety net.
Sorry, Nathan, continue.
No, just say, but when they fall, everyone suddenly is brilliant. That's exactly what it was there for. But if you think continuous learning is part of we're putting in a safety net. We're giving people the reason to want to stay, and so you're saying, well, we will absolutely contribute to reducing attrition. We will absolutely contribute to the reducing of the cost of hire, etc. But as long as we're doing a great job, you might not necessarily see all of that because we're the safety net, right? So it's and again, I think to your point, Francis, it's absolutely right. I think L&D folk feel nervous sometimes about saying, I will contribute to the finances. Because again, we've been told, oh, you're a cost centre. So you're a cost centre. Yes. And you're working within a cost centre. So therefore, we'll have this kind of confluence of apathy where everyone says, good enough is good enough. Is everyone happy with that? Right, well, let's just go back to the basement and be okay with ourselves.
But once you've established it, you can, and yeah, to the point about, yeah, getting the right story, you can use that ongoing. Somebody that I think is really successful here, who oversees a call center, was able to establish a correlation between cost savings when employees successfully make it past probation. So call center employees make it past probation, and is able to put a cost to that. When someone passes probation, there is a number. So let's say 10,000, there is a number associated with that. So over the years has just continued to report on that. So now is associated with that revenue number. And the narrative in the company now is that that learning and development team drives revenue or saves cost. And another example of it's actually a retail company based here in Ireland, but their L&D team has been so good about ensuring that any success of the business, L&D is attributed to their piece of that success. So if they open a new store and they train all their new retail staff, that at the company level, at the executive level, and they don't even have to ask for it now. That's just a given that we never could have done this without our training team. And the reason we were able to successfully open a new branch is because of our training team. That doesn't happen overnight, but that's where if you start building that, building your comfort level with the correlation piece of it, and then also building your storytelling, and then eventually people will tell that story for you. And that's the goal. That's when you just live the dream of, you don't have to be knocking down doors to get at the big table. It's just assume that you'll be there.
Perfect. Well, thank you both. So that was the final topic. But before we get to the questions piece, maybe just to wrap up on what we've covered today. And look, thanks again to Nathan and Francis. Really enjoyed some of the inputs. So the key takeaways from my perspective are: continuous learning is essential for contact center success. I think that's a fairly straightforward one. Identifying skill gaps helps build effective and ongoing learning and development. Technology can enhance learning, but it's got to be used wisely, I think is a key point. And then measuring impact ensures that training leads to real improvements. But thank you all. And I can see we've had a question come in then from Oliver. So Oliver has said, how important is it to understand your agent's different learning styles and needs? And how can we provide support in this area? So Francis or Nathan, who wants to take that one?
Happy to. So a piece I used to do was, learning is an active thing that the learner chooses to join in with, whereas training is a passive thing, potentially at its worst. So, I can train you, but I can't learn you. Learning is on you. So I think part of the responsibility is you can avail a range of options. So on any given topic, for example, you go, right, if you feel better just reading a Harvard Business Review, then there's that stuff. If you want to listen to a TED Talk or watch a webinar, then there's that stuff. If you want to be in a workshop with a few people and have a natter, then there's that option. And I think again it goes back to the creativity of, well, we'll avail options for you, and as long as you do that and signpost people to that, and also kind of help set them up with, so there's some activities before, there's a primary activity is kind of helpful, some practical ways you can apply this into the day job, that would be helpful. But I think other than that, I think you can recognize it, but you need to avail a suite of options. But also then leave the onus on the learner at times. Say, okay, now it's on you. Our baseline assumption is you're a grown up because we're taking a salary. So here's the opportunity to act as a grown up, and you develop yourself and you step up into this rather than waiting to be, scheduled when you come away from the day job, taken into a classroom, talked at. A week later you remember 11% and you're back to it.
I think I would just underscore the point about understanding your learner persona. So understanding the just pieces of, where do people work, and do they have an effective place to learn, and you don't need to understand individual learning styles necessarily for that. If there is not a quiet place for someone to learn or time in their day, I think we sometimes forget about those things of that actually cuts across all of our learners. And I would say too that being honest with ourselves about, and I'll go back to the recorded meeting, listening to a 60-minute recorded meeting is not effective for any learner. And so even if you're not just, this is not effective for a visual learner, this is not effective for anyone. So I usually coach or try to push people towards, before you are thinking about individual learning styles, make sure that you're really grounded in general principles for effective learning so that you are delivering effective learning as on principle, and then you can start to work on some of the nuances of learning styles. But I often think I am an auditory learner, so I can retain information for listening to a recorded 60-minute meeting, but that is not effective learning for me, even as someone who can learn in that way. So I would say make sure that we're not using learning styles as a way to get out of holding ourselves accountable for delivering impactful learning all of the time to everyone.
Perfect. Thanks, Francis and Nathan. David, anything to add before we bring things to a close?
No, I really enjoyed the conversation. Thanks, guys. Nice summary at the end, Aaron. So it's nice to see that. So yeah, we're just out of time. So I just want to thank everyone for joining. Also to Francis, Nathan, for your great insight into this topic. We had a lot of interest in it, as we can see from the numbers, and Aaron also taking us through the conversation as well. So yeah, thanks very much. And we got a nice round of applause there from Oliver. So obviously you guys answered the question. Nice to see all the emojis coming in. So yeah, thanks very much, everyone. And as you leave today, there is a quick survey. So if you leave your comments there, that'd be great. And yeah, I'll leave you on your way and enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks again.
Thanks all.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks all.
Thanks,
Cheers,
Nathan,
bye.
Francis. Bye-bye.